Okay, by this point in the course, you will have done a lot of reading assignments, a lot of translation homework, and while we haven't gone over it explicitly, at this point you should have an intuitive understanding of how to put these characters together, even if you don't know specific rules yet. But now that we're going to start writing, it's helpful to actually understand these rules for how curves and different strokes are joined together. So let's do an example. We have the word ache, which, as we learned previously, is a combination of the A circle and then the K stroke. So immediately you might wonder, how do you join these two together? And there are two ways, one which is correct and one is incorrect. We have an A loop like this, so we could represent ache this way, or perhaps we could represent ache this way. But which one is correct? By this point, for those of you who have done the readings and the homeworks, will know that this one is correct, but you probably don't know exactly why. And so there's a rule in shorthand when it comes to circles that are joined with curved strokes, and it states that if a circle is joined at the beginning or end of a curved stroke, the circle is placed inside the curve. So for ache, that AK sound would be placed inside the curve. So that's the word ache. Let's do another example. Let's do alley. Alley. So I'm going to do the correct and incorrect way. Let's do the incorrect way first. So alley would be A-L-E. Alley. Okay, so we got the first loop right, and that is the inside of this curve here. And then we have the L, but then we misplaced the E loop on the end of this L stroke. And so the correct way would be to place it on the inside of that curve. Let's do another word. Let's do the word gay. So as you can imagine, gay is written like this, where you have the G and then the A loop, again, inside the curve. You wouldn't write it like this, in part because this is much more efficient and it's following the same writing motion that you're already doing when you're doing a lot of these curves. If you double back on itself, you're having to switch directions and it becomes a lot less efficient. So rule number one, if the circle is joined at the beginning or end of a curved stroke, the circle is placed inside the curve. Next is rule number two, and it relates to circles that are joined with straight strokes. Okay, let's take a couple more word examples. Let's do the word eight. Let's do the word me. And let's do the word day. Day. Okay, so eight, there are two ways to write it, as we've learned so far. There is an A and then a T. Put those together, and the rule states that if a circle is joined at the beginning or at the end of a curved stroke, the circle is written with right motion. Okay, so if we follow that rule here, the circle for 8 would be written with right motion. Remember, right motion is clockwise. 8. So 8. Wouldn't be this, because this would say art. So right motion plus straight stroke is written like this. A-T. A-T. Okay? Similarly, me, the word me, is written with an M and then an E loop. And based on this rule, where the loop is written with right motion, the me would be just like that. Okay? Wouldn't be like this. This would say mere, using the implied R concept in the anniversary edition of Gregg Shorthand. But even if you learn simplified, it follows this rule where loops joined with straight lines are written with right motion. So day is really just the opposite of 8. We have our straight stroke, and then we have our right motion A sound, so day. Okay, again, if you wrote it like this would say dare. In simplified, this would be dare explicitly, but that's why we write it with right motion, so day. Okay, so again, rule 2 states that if a circle is joined at the beginning or end of a curved stroke, the circle is written with right motion. Right motion, or clockwise. So next we have rule 3, and it pertains to circles between strokes. So this rule states that where consonants meet to form an angle or a point, the circle is written on the outside of the angle. Okay, so it's easiest if we just do some examples. Let's do tail, kick, and cane. Cane. Okay, kick. So kick, as we know, is just a combination of the K sound, the E sound, and then the K sound again. So if we were to join these, you have K, E, K. So what this rule states is that basically where these two consonants sound, or where they meet, if you were to take out the vowel sound, it would be joined like this, k-k, k-k. And so where these meet is at an angle. And so at this angle, this loop is written on the outside of that angle. So the converse and the incorrect version would be k, I, k, or something like that. Like it's very non-intuitive to write this way. So you should have no problem with this rule. It's much more intuitive to have the vowel sound or the loop or the circle in this case be at the outside of the angle formed by those two consonants. So again, we'll do kick, kick, kick. Okay, so same thing with tail. So tail is a combination of T, A, L, so T, A, L. So what this rule states is that where these two strokes, these consonants, T and L, are meet, T, L, the loop is on the outside. Okay, so again, the correct version would be T, A, L, and then we finish out that stroke, L. And the incorrect version would be writing something like this, T, don't even know how you would write at that point, but so again, where these meet at an angle, it's always going to be on the outside of the angle that is met. Finally, let's do the word cane. Cane is just K-A-N phonetically. So we have our K, we have our A, and our N. So again, if we were to write it incorrectly, it would be K-A-N. So where the K and the N meet, there's this angle right there. So again, the loop goes on the outside of that angle. So cane becomes K-A-N, something like that. Okay, so again, it's pretty intuitive if you've done the reading homework to this point, and there really should be no hesitation when you're joining these loops and these strokes because you've already put in the legwork, identifying and reading and understanding the Gregg in the previous homeworks. Okay, on that same theme, the next thing you might encounter related to rule number 3 is when straight strokes join curves without forming an angle, or when the two curves of the same motion join smoothly. In that case, then the circle is placed inside the curve. So, for example, we have the word rate, R-A-T, rate. So what this rule states is that if we are joining the two consonants, and you have a curved stroke and your straight stroke, and they effectively don't form an angle. So what this rule tells us is that you basically are just putting the loop inside the curve of the curved stroke. So rate would be here. It would not be out here, written with right motion. Okay, so again, just to solidify, rate written out is like that. It is not like this, okay, because you want to put that loop on the inside of the curved stroke. Let's do the word take. So take is a lot like rate, but just kind of inverted. So we have T-A-K for take, T-A-K. So take, again, if you just wrote it out, the consonants T and then K, you are going to write, you guessed it, that loop on the inside of that first adjoining and forming curve. So take, okay? It would not be t-a-k, because you'd be doubling back on yourself. It would be forming this awkward loop. And so this rule, again, states that you're placing it on the inside of the curved stroke. So where there is no angle joined. Okay, dig. I changed this from rattle. I don't know where I got the rattle from. It was a different example. Maybe it's similar to rate. But anyway, dig is it's a better example of this word. So you have the word dig, which is D-E-G written out in shorthand, which is just a D stroke, an E stroke, and a G stroke. So in shorthand, similarly up here, it would look something like this. I'll give myself some more room, or we'll work on this line. D, I, G. Okay, so again, following this rule, you place it on the inside of the adjoining curved stroke. It would not be out here. It would not be dig like that. That's incorrect. It would be dig. Okay, moving right along. Rule 4 states that circles between straight strokes are written with right motion. So this is similar to our rule number 2, where we're joining circles with straight strokes, but now we have a combination of different straight strokes. So for example, let's take the word main. In shorthand is just an M, a long A sound, and an N. So an M, an A sound, and an N. Putting that together is just like this, okay? It would not be like this because this would violate rule number 4, where circles between straight strokes are written with right motion. Again, this is in part because of the implied R concept that we learned previously, but it's also just for the sake of ergonomics and flow. We want to keep the forward motion as often as possible. Okay, let's do the word dad. Dad. So we had a straight stroke that was flat. Now let's do a straight stroke that is upward. So D, A, D. And again, you'll notice that the curve is written on the inside or with right motion to these straight strokes. Mean is a lot like main, but again, M-E-N. And these are proportionally ginormous, but you get the point. The M, the E, and then the N. And you'll notice the E loop is written with right motion. Okay, so again, rule 4 states that circles between straight strokes in the same direction are written with right motion. So the writing direction is this. So these loops, these circles, are going to be written with right hand motion. Okay, finally, we have a rule pertaining to circles between opposite curves. And the solution is that basically the circles are turned back on the first curve. So for example, the word rec, we have an R, we have an E, and we have a K. So these two curves are opposite directional curves. We have a left motion curve and a right motion curve, and then we have this circle here in the middle. To join them, you're always going to turn them back on the first curve. Or if you would rather think about it, it's going to be on the inside of the second curve. So to write this, it would be R, E, K. Okay, so this is correct. This is incorrect, because rule number 5 pertaining to circles between opposite curves states that the circles between the opposite curve are turned back on that first curve. So let's just do another example. We have lake, which is L plus A plus K. So lake would be L-A-K, lake. So you notice, again, I turned it back on the first curve, and it's inside that second curve. Okay, next example, we have kill. So a kill is a K sound, an E loop, and an L sound. Again, opposite directional curves here. So this rule states that we are turning it back on the first curve, and it's going to go on the inside of the second curve. So we have K, E, L, K-ill. It would not be K, E, L like that. This is incorrect. This one is correct. So here are all the different rules written out explicitly. It's worth keeping these somewhere handy. I recommend putting it on the back of the cheat sheet that came inside your course packet. And then you just have it handy on you in case you ever encounter a rule where you're not sure, or a word where you're not sure which rule pertains to what, or how to join different curves and different strokes.